Today, we'll be ranking the most famous New York eateries and restaurants that seem to be on every tourist's radar. We'll share the pros and cons of each and let you know which ones are actually worth your valuable time. Then we'll even name some less famous but local alternatives that you may not have heard of but need to. Here we go. Let's start the rankings, and the factors we'll look at are location, how iconic they are, and value for your money. Starting with number 12, most famous hot dog in New York, Nathan's. Ranking this one last for a variety of reasons, but let's start with the pros. If you are a history buff, this is where the hot dog was invented. At the corner of Surf and Stillwell Avenue in Coney Island, Brooklyn, there's a nostalgia factor of eating this next to what was once America's most famous boardwalk. Sure, I guess the interior is kind of cool. It's very colorful and kitschy, so you could take a nice photo. The cons, well, you need to schlep almost an hour from Midtown for a hot dog. And the last time I went, it was about $5, which is way more than you'd pay for a random dirty water dog on the street in the city. And I don't think you're getting a better product. Seriously, I can't tell the difference between this and a Nathan's in Apopka, Florida. It's a hot dog. And don't get me started on the lines either. My advice here, if you want to knock a hot dog off your list, go to a local. My viewer's top pick is Billy's next to Central Park, so you can chat with someone who's done it for 30 years. Another favorite is Dan Rossi, the hot dog king who sets up in front of the Met and is a disabled veteran. And later on in the video, we mentioned another famous local hot dog spot that I like way more. Junior's. Now, in all fairness, this review is about going for their famous cheesecake. I haven't tried any of their other diner items. The pros. Well, the greatest pro of Junior's is its location for tourists. They have two locations in Midtown at 49th and 45th Streets. The original is in downtown Brooklyn, and the only one I've ever visited, so it's easy to get to, and perhaps the name recognition would cause you to eat there. They're also open till midnight on weekdays and 1 a.m. on weekends, which is helpful if you're a night owl. The cons. The Midtown locations are quite expensive. A simple 2-egg platter for breakfast is $13.95. But what we're here to talk about is the famous cheesecake. It's $9.25, almost $10 for a slice of cheesecake. Now, if this was the best cheesecake in New York City, I could maybe let it slide, but Junior's is not on that level. Being brutally honest, it's on about the same level as cheesecakes I'd eat at diners growing up in Jersey. I actually didn't know much about Junior's till I started this channel and saw how frequently tourists were mentioning dining there. I've tried it a few times and just don't get the hype. My all-time favorite New York cheesecake still belongs to Eileen's Special Cheesecake, and they sell a small version which is perfect for the on-the-go tourist. Nam Wah Tea Parlor. You may have walked by Doyer Street in Chinatown and seen a huge line, and they are the cause. The pros. They're Chinatown's oldest dim sum parlor, and being in business for over 100 years in New York really says something. The vibe inside honestly feels like you're on a movie set. The retro diner feel is pulled off so well. This could be the most photogenic spot on the list, and if that's all you're looking for, then you should eat a meal there. Which leads us to the cons, because while it passes the vibe check, the dim sum is just okay. Having dined at a lot of other dim sum spots all over Chinatown, I think you could do better. If I had to pick one similar spot in Chinatown instead, I'd walk a few blocks away to Ping's. It's more local, and I prefer the food quality and pricing. Joe's is the kind of spot people either love or hate, and I find myself somewhere in the middle. The pros. Joe's has become quite synonymous with a New York slice. The OG location on Carmine Street in the Village always has a crowd, but don't let that scare you because the line moves fast. A ton of celebrities have eaten there, and heck, Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, used to work there. So that's pretty cool. If you were to just go to one spot for a slice in the city, you could do far worse. Just don't expect it to wow you. The cons. I think it's a bit overrated, and tourists really are obsessed with it. I can think of 10 other places off the top of my head where I'd rather go for a slice. The ingredients are fine, but it just doesn't stand out to me in any way. I find a lot of people that are in love with the spot like it because of nostalgia, or they just haven't tried many other pizzerias in the city, or heck, Even in Greenwich Village, I'd send you to Bleecker Street Pizza a few blocks away for a slice over them. Joe's is stuck in time, and if that's what you're after, I say go for it, but I've just become too much of a pizza snob to really promote them that much. Katz's Deli, another spot that tourists are absolutely in love with, and many locals will fight you to the death if you dare slander them, but it's sitting on 8th on my list for a reason. The pros. Going to Katz's is a New York experience, albeit a rather touristy one these days. Walk in, grab your ticket, and then wait in a long line to get called up to the counter where you can even sample a little of your deli meat while your pastrami gets sliced up. You won't find this rite of passage anywhere else in New York, and for that, I think they're one of a kind. Outside of the obvious that it's touristy and you may have to wait in a long line, we'll jump right to the pastrami sandwich. I don't love their rye bread, which really struggles to hold together those monstrous mounds of meat, and the quality has been hit or miss. Sometimes I eat there and I think, alright, this is a classic for a reason, and other times I'm not sure if it's a tourist trap or not, and like most of the famous eateries on the list, it's expensive. Very expensive. $27 for a sandwich, some would consider that outrageous. Yes, it can serve 2 people or 1 very hungry person, but with it already costing your kids college fund to visit New York these days, I can't justify it. I tell you to go to Sarge's Deli to pay about the same price in a more local spot that tastes better, or even David's Brisket House in Brooklyn if you want a budget pastrami option, as they offer different sizes, which is practically unheard of. There aren't a lot of bagel spots on this list, but if I had to think of one that keeps coming up with my tourist watching, it would be Essa Bagel, and with 3 Manhattan locations, they are quite accessible. The pros. Much like a Joe's, if I was to put a New York bagel in a time capsule and bury it for 1,000 years, Essa Bagel would be a great example. They've been around for nearly 50, these bad boys are doughy and thick, and they normally smother on enough cream cheese to pave a driveway. This is definitely a solid bagel. If you're in Midtown, it could be worth a stop. As for the cons, it's not the best bagel in New York. While it's better than a random deli or bodega find, they don't hold up against the city's heavyweights. Yes, they are humongous. I just don't think they have the crispy texture or soft interior that the cream of New York's bagel crop have. And the flagship location in Midtown is both on tourists and locals' radar. It was the longest I had to wait in line for a bagel, which as a New Yorker, you'd want to be in and out in a hurry. It's just not worth the hype for me. Peter Luger's is a bit of a controversial topic. Like Katz's, people either love it or love to hate it. It's either the best steakhouse they've ever been to or a complete waste of money. Let's dive into this iconic steakhouse, open since 1887. The pros. On the channel, I've only ever covered their lunchtime burger special, which made with prime grade chuck is actually fantastic, and I prefer it to the steak. Although it's not the main reason that people go there, you go to Peter Luger's to step back in time. You go for the experience, the no-nonsense yet humorous waiters, the interesting characters that eat there, and a very good porterhouse steak. The cons. No matter what time your reservation is, you'll probably be waiting 15 to 30 minutes for the table. The service is kind of gruff, it's expensive, although what did you expect from an institution that really hasn't changed much over the years? I'm no expert on fine dining or steaks, but I have visited most of the famous spots in New York, and Peter Luger's didn't even rank in my top 3, which is a theme we're seeing throughout this video, that a lot of the legendary spots tend to rest on their laurels while other restaurants have to be on a higher level just to get attention. New York Times food critic Pete Wells, in his famed 1-star review of them, wrote, "What gnaws at me every time I eat a Luger porterhouse is the realization that it's just another steak and far from the best New York has to offer." Magnolia Bakery. Sex and the City may have put them on the map and on the radar of many tourists, but they've been well known for almost 30 years now. This review isn't about their cupcakes, which I find to be mediocre, but their banana pudding. The pros. Magnolia Bakery is on a beautiful block in the West Village on Bleecker. Close enough for you to grab anything to go and wander some of the nicest streets in the city. I think it's still a good deal, $4.95 for a small order of their classic banana pudding, which somehow, after all these years, never disappoints. They have multiple flavors like red velvet, chocolate hazelnut, and more. Pro tip, order ahead on their website so you can skip the line. And maybe I'm biased because I used to live in the Village and frequented it, but this is a great pick. Cons. If you don't order in advance, the line can be a bit long depending on when you go. I never loved their cupcakes, and I've tried quite a few of them. I always liked Molly's Cupcakes, another Village institution, more, but New York has as many good cupcake places as it has good pizza spots, and I'm not docking them for this. Joe's Shanghai. If you asked any tourist or newcomer to New York to name just one soup dumpling spot, this would be the answer. And this isn't even my favorite soup dumpling in Chinatown, but it's a place that I think does somewhat live up to the hype. Pros. The new location is actually really nice. They moved in 2019 to their Bowery Street spot after spending nearly 30 years on Pell. It's bigger, so wait times are less, the service is fast once you get in, and $11.95 for 8 pork soup dumplings is a fair price. These actually taste really good too, the broth has a nice flavor, and the pork and crab are my favorite. My Chinese American friends Ben and Ming even put their seal of approval on the spot. As for the cons, if you like the communal style seating of the original, that no longer exists. There was something kind of charming about that experience. Even with more seats, you are likely to wait for a table here, and you'll probably be surrounded by 80 to 90% tourists. It's also cash only, which is a mild nuisance since they do have ATM machines inside. I've heard from others that outside of the soup dumplings, some of the other food choices are pretty mediocre. Giuliana's. This is in reference to Giuliana's in Dumbo, Brooklyn, which used to be the original Grimaldi's location and has since entered the lore of New York pizza rivalries. But we won't go into that story on this video. Spoiler, Giuliana's is way better, and this has become extremely popular with visitors to Dumbo after walking the Brooklyn Bridge. Pros. Their cold oven pizza, plain and simple, is worth it. This is the original oven that Patsy Grimaldi made famous. They know what they're doing, and for a nice group lunch or dinner, this is a fantastic choice. Heck, I think their classic margarita is so good, it doesn't even need extra toppings. Cons. There tends to be a line to get in here, and you can only order a pie, which could make this prohibitive if you're not very hungry. A pie starts at $26, which is not on the cheap side. I wouldn't call this the best pizza in New York, but it is definitely one of the better ones out there, especially in an area where if you're a tourist, you'll likely be exploring anyway. I wouldn't stop you from going at all. Gray's Papaya. This is the cheapest stop in the video, and it's really won me over. Pros. There's only one Gray's Papaya left in the city, and with Papaya King shutting its doors, it's the last of a dying breed, the tropical hot dog shop. Gray's has gotten lots of attention because of their crazy price deals, like their old recession special. Currently, it's $3.25 for a single hot dog and $6.95 for 2 hot dogs and one of their signature tropical drinks. The hot dog won't change your life, but standing in a fine New York institution that's been around for over 50 years just might. We also recently covered their breakfast special, which is so cheap, it seems like it's straight out of the 90s. $3 for a coffee and a breakfast sandwich of egg, cheese, and either ham, bacon, or sausage. It could be Manhattan's cheapest breakfast deal. Cons. Well, there's nowhere to sit, and the place is pretty bare bones, so it's nothing fancy. It's a hot dog, so temper your expectations for anything amazing. And while the breakfast is cheap, you'd probably get higher quality at your local bodega for an extra $1 or $2. Topping our list of famous eateries is Russ and Daughters. Open 110 years, this Lower East Side appetizing institution is a must visit. The pros. I don't know if I've ever had better Nova salmon or lox in the city, and you know how we talked about the experience of walking into Katz's? Well, going to Russ and Daughters is just as fun, grabbing a ticket and ordering from behind the counter. Well, $17 for a lox and cream cheese bagel is very pricey. This is the one place I would pay for it and not complain. They've managed to keep their standards high, plus Jewish appetizing stores of this nature are very hard to find these days. The location in the Lower East Side and the fact that they have a separate sit-down cafe around the corner makes this perfect for any visitor to New York who is willing to try something classic. Cons. Outside of the price and potential for lines, the biggest issue I have with Russ and Daughters are their bagels. Since they don't make them in-house, you're really not there for them. The star is the cured fish. I've even heard of some of my viewers getting some lox or other cured fish from Russ and Daughters and getting a bagel somewhere else to create the ultimate breakfast sandwich. Now that you know the most famous eateries in New York's rankings, you may want to visit some attractions, and in this video, I rank all of New York's attractions from worst to best. Watch this next.